Time lapse in Brisbane on the 3rd of April 2021. There's a low pressure system to the north and a big high in the southern Tasman Sea, and that's pushing onshore flow here. Lots of moisture, and there's showers throughout the day. And you can see that the clouds are moving away from the camera, so they're coming from the southeast and going to the northwest, but those higher clouds are coming more from the right and going towards the left. So basically what's happening is in the lower atmosphere, the airflow is pointed more towards the low pressure system. It's, normally in the southern hemisphere, it goes clockwise around the low pressure system or anti-clockwise around the high. So since the high is to the south, that's why it's moving that way to the northwest from the southeast, if you still follow. So it's actually leaking across those isobars and going towards the low pressure system, because if there wasn't the Coriolis force, it would go straight from the high pressure to the low pressure. But because of the Coriolis, that has a balance between the Coriolis and the pressure gradient force, and that means that they travel along the isobars if they were the only two forces, because they balance each other perfectly when they're the only two forces, and that's called geostrophic flow. So basically the higher up clouds are geostrophic because they're pretty much the only forces acting on the wind up there. So that's the pressure gradient pushing from the high to the low, and the Coriolis, which is actually pushing the other way. And the motion is at right angles to both of those forces, which I guess is a little bit strange, but that's what it does. Whereas in the lower atmosphere, there's a lot of friction as it moves over. Even there's friction over the ocean, but there's more over land. And the more friction there is, the more it moves across the isobars. So basically the friction slows the flow, it reduces the wind, and the Coriolis is, the pressure gradient force stays the same, but the Coriolis is less because that depends on the motion. So because the friction has slowed it down, the pressure gradient force is stronger and it pulls it towards the low pressure system. So yeah, you can figure out which way the low pressure system is by looking at that. I don't know, can't you just have the wind on your back and then you point to the right and that's the low pressure system? I think that's the other way to do it. But it's the opposite in the northern hemisphere. And you can see, like, it looks like an old movie with the little black specks across the screen. So there's lots of birds. That was the advantage of shooting out of the 50th floor. A lot less stuff in the way, but this is going straight into clear air. On the 50th floor I was going out the window, which is often dirty, so win some, you lose some. Yeah, it's nice to see those showers go through. I think I had a few other things I was going to talk about before we get to the end of the time lapse. So yeah, basically going back to Coriolis. So Coriolis is what makes all the swirly things happen in weather. If you look at the satellite image, you see all these things swirling around. The reason that the wind turns is just inertia. So Newton's Newton's first law is inertia. So things keep doing what they're already doing unless a force acts on them. So the wind wants to keep going the same way, and it would, but the Earth's rotating. So as the Earth rotates, it's going a different way to what it was. So the wind tries to keep going the same way, which is apparent to us as turning, but it's actually trying to go straight. So a way to think about that is if the wind happened to be blowing towards the sun, and then it suddenly, like the Earth rotated underneath it, it would try to keep blowing towards the sun. So the Coriolis makes things follow the sun around the sky. Anyway, that's all I've got time for. Wasn't that hard to fill up the 5 minutes.